you're obviously an artistic person. I mean, just look at your jacket and the paintings behind you. So yeah, you got into black culture through art, like many racialized white people have reported in the past, through hip hop and through just TV probably as well, and then boom, you're in the middle of Black Central, another realm, as you put it, and experiencing, uh, recognizing your own lack of knowledge, your own ignorance,
Yeah.
and leaning into it with curiosity, which is something that I find admirable and that I wish more people would do. On social media, I do openly call people ignorant. And the reason why I
Mm,
do that is it's because I want to destigmatize that word, because
mm.
it's a statement of like human nature. So it can't be something that people are afraid or worried or concerned about, because literally it describes all of us at all times.
Right.
So like yeah, but so that kind of like I liked what you said when you were like, I decided after realizing I didn't know anything that I had to like start asking questions. That's the exact right response. I wish more people would would think that way. But there's various reasons why that doesn't happen, but you're the exception. And I just credit you for that and for making that choice, because it is a choice to do what you did. You didn't have to respond that way. You chose to ask questions. You chose to throw yourself into it. You chose to talk to those mothers. You chose to put yourself through that and to engage in that process. That's a rare choice that most people wouldn't make in general. I'm sure you're aware of that. And
Oh yeah.
so I guess my first question that I want to ask you is, why did you make that choice? Like, if you had to like distill it down, why did you make the choice to engage in that endeavor in the first place?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I mean, I think that changes as I, you know, grow older, in perspective, and I get a maybe a deeper perspective on that. I think that I really wanted to find purpose, and I'm the type of person who's lived out my passion. That was never a problem, right? Like I was never part of that family where the father was like, you know what, I know you want to write, but it's not to pay the bills. It's go work the farm or whatever. My family was very much go chase your dreams, and so I never had to go over that hill, and so I lived on, I guess, just the cusp of chaos in that way, because I would just kind of follow my ambitions and passions to their fullest, and that brought me to a very lonely place uh, before I moved to New Orleans, and uh, it was a place where I was trying to become an artist, wanted to be the best artist I could be, and that drove me into solitude and sort of hatred of people, just in general. Just kind of a general misanthrope. But I was fooling myself because I was never that way, right? Like it was kind of a fake uh, cloak that I put on. But I thought that in order to create, you had to kind of hate in a way, and despise and judge, and that's the only way that you can create something significant or meaningful. And that drove me to solitude. And in that solitude, I kind of questioned, where, like, I don't know, I questioned my meaning, like,
Yeah, I was
and
gonna say you were probably asking yourself, what's the point?
Yeah, I mean, I was a nihilist. You know, I was an atheist. I was I mean, not a nihilist like I was wearing a black turtleneck and you know, that type of thing. But you know, I just didn't believe in anything in the biggest sense of the word. That everything was comedy, everything was comedy fodder, and so it had, you know, with comedy, everything is allowable, and so it all becomes this uh, place that nothing nothing has saintliness or sacredness, and that's to me is nihilism, right? Like that's where the gods have fallen, and so I wanted to find meaning, and for me, when I read King, I felt that meaning. I felt that, you know, the bend of the universe, as he talks about, and I felt like King was this answer to the great conversation that was happening in the West, from, you know, Plato to Aristotle to Shakespeare to Nietzsche, and kind of ending in German existentialism and questioning meaning. And then King comes along and says, you know, what we're doing here right now, this nonviolent revolution is creating meaning right here in front of you. And I love how King, he always kind of talks about Nietzsche like Nietzsche's in the crowd, you know, which he very much is. You know, it's the '60s, so everyone was reading Hermann Hesse and Nietzsche and reading a bunch of German, you know, existentialists. But for me, I saw that there was this real choice of nonviolence or non-resistance, and because I saw that nihilism, I wanted to be part of that nonviolence. And so for me, it was, um, once again, it goes back to those ideas. It was chasing this idea and being completely gung ho on this idea, just kind of being laid bare before the idea, I guess, you know? Uh, and because of that, it was just whatever I needed to do to get closer to that idea, you know, to bring it into existence, I would do, you know, and uh, I'd have to have the ball to do it. And so there wasn't a lot of forethought when I moved out of New Orleans. It wasn't like I didn't have I was 25. So I mean, I was 24, 25. So I didn't have like the wisdom of, okay, what are you going to do for a job? And, you know, what are you like, that wasn't even in my vocabulary. It was like, you know, King is leading me in this direction. New Orleans seems like there's something exciting happening with the unity of like artists and people around this idea of nonviolence. You know, people are marching the street, and it was just a very basic sketch of a life that I caught a glimmer of, you know, January of 2007. And, you know, 2 weeks later, I'm moving all my stuff to New Orleans. So I think that for me, it was just trying to understand this idea and live it out. And uh, I knew that I couldn't live these things out on the sidelines in ivory tower, uh, you know, reading Nietzsche and his answer to things, or reading Heidegger and his answer to things. I needed to know, um, you know, how I could create this in actual life right now. This movement of nonviolence, and so yeah, I think that it just became one of those things where I connected all the ideas, and it looked like there was this great synthesis of unity and meaning in this thought of going to New Orleans, and I just went with that. You know, it was very quixotic. Like I think my life is very much like Don Quixote is. You know, there's very much like I kind of just follow the books, and whatever the books are telling me, like that's kind of where I'm going, and I don't think a lot about real life. You know, and in that case, that was very much a blessing. You know, because if I would have sat there and think, oh, you know, okay, you don't know these guys. You could be shot. You could, if I thought about all that stuff, I wouldn't, you know. But yeah, I think that uh, well, the people were so grateful, and I needed that in my life. I needed to like be able to have the capacity to give at that point in my life because I didn't feel like I was worth anything, and to be able to even just give my time and you know my talent of listening and writing what I'm hearing, um, and people being grateful for that, like that helped me so much. Just see my own self, and the people's story were just so captivating. It was, I mean, just in a very much an artistic manner. Like these are the best stories going right now. Like I mean, these stories you couldn't make up in a room on up in the towers of New York. Thinking about what possible worlds could we create. I mean, these were otherworldly worlds that these people had lived through, and uh, I was there to just listen. And so that really, that kind of addiction to the story, really drove me as well. So yeah, I mean, I think it was a lot of different things. And once I'm down here, I just got kind of in that routine of going and listening and just loving it all. I just kind of settled in and said, this is life now. This is it. I'll just, like you said, lean into it.
Who needs a job when you have your spirit, sir?
Yeah.
Yeah, obviously it served you well. I'm sure it has caused some missteps as well because it must. But that is pretty cool. I really love it. A true artist spirit you have, and yeah, what I'm really trying to do with the Contraband Wagon is draw people's attention to decisions that would lead them to a path of anti-racism, basically, or not, right? Whatever their decision is, but like ultimately a lot of people don't even know that there's like a choice to make, right? And
I know
so
you're absolutely right.
you obviously understand that there is one, and that you've made one, and so like I kind of like would love for you to talk a little bit about that. Like, can you go into some detail maybe about, I mean, let's be real here, right? Like, you're a rare person in a lot of different ways. And one of them is, probably in the racialized white community that you grew up in, right? Like, I mean, what kind of, I want to see, can you contrast your evolution, I guess, of race consciousness with other people who you grew up around? Maybe that's a
Yeah.
good way to start.
Right. Yeah, I think that for me, I thirst for direct experience. Um, and I don't know if other people do. And so they're able to see these things on TV and be happy with, you know, the opinions of others telling them, uh, about the world. And I think that, you know, I felt like growing up, in New Jersey and Hunter County that I mean, there's no, I guess, better way to put it, in a more poetic way. It was a bubble, and I think that people stay in bubbles, uh, their own, um, and they experience a lot of people through television and through art, but probably not high art, mostly popular, which gives a very superficial view of humanity, right? Like there is truth to a lot of popular music and popular culture, but at the same time, it's very superficial, right? Like it's not going to get you to see another person's soul. Um, quite like a conversation. And so I think that um, there's a level of, I guess, humility, right? That has to come with going out and putting yourself in a circumstance that you don't quite know what's going to happen, right? I mean, I think that honestly, like with all these jokes about Black community in the 90s, and it's always white people acting awkward around them because they don't understand how to handshake, you know, and these were the fears of white people, right? Like that they just don't understand the mannerisms or different calls to action, and they won't be able to read Black people, right? Because yeah, and so I think that if that's the case, then someone would hesitate to go and be around all Black people because you are going to be Don Quixote, right? Like you are eventually look absurd, and absurdity, fear of the absurd. I mean, that's a real thing. To see yourself in absurdity, it's one of the most frightening things. This is about as close to death as you can get. Uh, when in the crowd or amongst people, and for me, that was like never my fear because I always just want to make people laugh, and so I think that really helped me. That I had no shame in that manner. Um, and I think that the other thing is that, I really messed up in high school and I got into a lot of trouble. And here I am at this high school with a lot of people who, I mean, I can't remember the percentage, but I think I would say 50%, 30 to 50% of the people in my class went to Ivy League schools. So, that's pretty prestigious. And I'm getting, suspended and expelled. The dean pulls me aside and tells me that I'm going nowhere. Multiple teachers telling me I'm going nowhere. And so I guess I just didn't fear the absurd because I was down at the bottom. I could only go up, right? And so putting myself in those situations, like seeing myself as absurd or making a fool of myself or being around things that I don't understand, uh, I just felt like whatever happened to me, I could handle it either through asking questions or laughing at myself or being able to tell a great story because of it. Right. And so, yeah, I think that those things like kind of guarded me, as I went out into these very, different realms. And I think that most people, um, those big questions that are part of decisions, they really, I don't know. I go back to they get bogged down in the details, right? Like it's for me, it's the idea. Oh, it's the idea. I don't care what it's going to take. It's the idea. Like I have to be part of this. I chase the idea, and um, other people present the idea, and the idea is not the megaphone it is for me or for someone who's going to go out. It might be one stream, low volume voice amongst many others that are saying, "What are you doing? Like, you cannot do this. You're gonna end up broke. You're gonna end up, you know, uh, on the streets of New Orleans. You're gonna end up shot. They are savage down there. They'll kill you for looking at them, which is what people told me. Um, and so yeah, I think that that if people are driven by ideas, I think it really puts a lot of courage in their heart, and because the details, they're going to be able to be resilient above the details and the hardships because the idea, uh, which motivated them in the beginning, keeps motivating them. So yeah, I think that's maybe the one thing that really I see as different is that that ability to you know uh be humble enough to say, look, I'm not the know-it-all. I'm not the smartest guy in the room. I'm not Ivy League material. And so uh you know, what do I have to lose here? You know, I can get out of this situation, whatever it is. You know, I'm gonna come up and I'll be fine. And so, yeah, I think that's a big part of it. It's just most people don't want to see themselves.
You wanted to bring this idea to life. You know, you had a goal that you set for yourself and you stayed true to that goal. I feel like a lot of people, they let other people set their goals, they let other people set their intentions and their priorities, and they don't reflect on what those are. You had significant moments of reflection as an artist, self reflection, and time alone to think. And maybe that, like, you know, led you to a nihilist point of view at one point, but, um, you know, eventually you found some kind of meaning and purpose, and you're living that out right now. So, I guess I want to talk a little bit more about you living out that purpose, like, and the work that you do. I want you to tell everybody kind of what is that work that you do now, currently, um, and where can people support it as well at the end. Make sure you add that. All right.
Yeah, so I'll touch on a couple of things you touched on. You know, when I was growing up, I have this piece of paper that says, what do you want to be when you grow up? And I think I was maybe 4 years old, 3 or 4, artist, right? And I was surrounded by artists my whole life. My mom was an artist, and my grandma was an artist as well. And so, they really kind of pushed me, just kind of showed me art, and we'd go to museums, and I draw while I'm watching cartoons and TV and that type of stuff. But it's odd because art kind of just gets shoveled away when we're starting to talk about high school and reality, right? And there's no artist that would be like, no, you could pursue art, right? Like it wasn't even that someone was
I mean,
like anti
that's
me going towards that. It was just like, it wasn't even I didn't even think about it. It
that's
was like,
literally the reason why I turned away from, like, being a jazz trumpet player, like, is because,
yeah,
like, it was not even presented to me as, like, an option. Even I was in like
yeah,
5 different bands. I'm like literally already getting paid to do it, but it was
geez,
literally never talked about as like a
yeah.
potential future for me ever. No one
It's
was
so
talking about
odd.
it.
It's so odd to me, and that goes to show you that you need to be completely open with everyone that you meet and tell them things like, "Hey, you could do this for a living." Even if they just saw you on the street. Those type of random compliments. I can't believe how many profound epiphanies I've had because of just random people telling me things about myself that were just so blaringly obvious, but no one had actually verbalized it at all.
I
And
wasn't even,
so,
I mean, I wasn't even imagining it. Like, I
right,
mean, it was literally not even in my imagination. And so, like, yeah, if I had heard something like that, it would have definitely made me think about it and imagine it. And then maybe I would have come to, and I did eventually imagine it, right? But by the time I imagined it, it was basically like to give it up, right? Like, it was basically
yeah,
like to be like, all right, well, I guess this isn't happening. Like,
right,
because why would it? And then that was it, you know. So
yeah.
yeah, you're totally right about that. Anyway, sorry.
No, no. I mean, that goes to show you. I mean, yeah. So, art kind of got pushed to the side as I pursued philosophy, and I didn't really, I pursued writing before visual art. And that's because I was just, I ended up writing a couple of plays and like kind of comedy plays or skits in college. And, I really got into writing. And it wasn't until actually, a couple of things happened. You know, I was thinking about this. today. And when you're a writer, like I said, I mean, everything's you're criticizing everything, right? Like you're kind of critiquing everything, and you're judged on your ability to judge and critique. And during that time, it's Bush administration. Everyone's talking about the fall of America and democracy is dead, and just all these kind of very big ideas around the death of democracy. Um, and everyone in my age group is doing the same thing. They're writing their art around that. Um, you know, and when you move to New Orleans, like all your criticisms don't matter, right? Like all those interesting things that you can say at parties about, painting this picture of the plague or the death of America, or the wasteland. Everyone sees it every day. You go down a Ninth Ward and there's stairs to nowhere, literally stairs to nowhere. I mean, you cannot paint a more drastic vision of the wasteland than Lower Ninth Ward after Katrina. And so, to me, when I moved down here, it was kind of like, shut up and do something about it, right? Like, I don't care that you can do this, you can write, or you can do this, and give these great poetic interpretations of reality. Like, what are you going to do to help people? Because your words are not going to do much. And so that really challenged me to really try to fill as many needs as possible. And I found myself doing a lot that was very much like not thinking that it was even a thing for me, like typing, right? Like I didn't think I was a good typer, but all of a sudden people are, coming to me and say, "Oh my gosh, I can't believe how fast you type," and you know, and kind of offering my services for that, just volunteering because it would help someone with an application or whatever. And so that sense of service, I took on during my time here in New Orleans, and it was through that service that I started doing art again because of several reasons. I guess the one I don't really talk about that much is that I was coaching a baseball team in Central City, New Orleans, in Shakespeare Park, and uh, there was a league called the Piece of the Street League that was being put together, and I was helping, putting it together. And we had a team in Central City that I had to go out and recruit kids, and so I went on the street, and, you know, got a whole bunch of kids, and we played a whole summer at Shakespeare Park, which I found out at the end of the summer was probably about 50% gang members of this very large gang, that were hanging around there. Um, and I would go and coach these kids, and they're 10, 11, 12 years old, and it's summer, and so they come 2 hours, 3 hours early just to play baseball. And they had that sort of that commitment to baseball and joy that you would expect a 10, 11-year-old, 12-year-old kid to have. But at the same time, they were also selling drugs to support their family, or they were, for lack of a better word, gang leaders, of their clique at 12 years old, running crews, and that was amazing to me. Obviously, I saw that these kids were going down that road, and they didn't see themselves as I saw them. They didn't see all the things they could do with their life, the possibilities that they've already been, um, dominated by the culture of death, on the streets of New Orleans. And so I wanted to show them how beautiful they were, show their beauty, show their character, show their worth. I did it through actions by coaching every day, right? And showing them love. But I just felt like it wasn't enough, right? And so I started doing something I hadn't done in 12 years at the point, and picked up a pencil and started drawing them in the ways that I saw them, that would give them a sense of their own dignity, a sense of their own personality. And I did that for the whole team and printed it on baseball cards and gave it to them at the end of the season, in which we won. We won the championship. And that became the way in which I could show people their possibilities. And as a writer, it was very frustrating to me that I saw these things, right? And I tried to express it through words, but the words weren't able to build what I wanted to put in front of people. This um, world of nonviolence, this possibility of nonviolence, and so drawing became that possibility. It became creating that physicality of these ideas, and so I would draw up everyone around me. And a lot of people around me were working with stopping gun violence, and so I would basically kind of be the photographer all the time, and the only white guy sit there taking pictures of everyone at every event, and take those pictures that I felt really express something, and draw them. And so eventually, I was able to win a very large art contest called Art Fields, and I was able to become a full-time artist after that. And same time, I'm working with a group called Cure Violence Ceasefire, and helping bring that together during that time in 2011, 2012. But I saw that I was limited in that the program calls for credible messengers and to go and interrupt gun violence, right? To go in between these high risk kids that are 16, 17, 18 years old, and go over and say, there's other possibilities here. And the way it works is that 16, 17-year-old kid sees himself in the credible messenger, the guy who is a former gang member, is someone like Danny right here and Willie. They both have a lot of cred on the street, about who they were, and that person listen the teen, the high risk teen listens to that person because they've been there, and I didn't have that. Obviously, there's nothing I could do to change that, right? Like that's just never who I was. Um, but I still wanted to help, and so the way I saw it, I wanted to help stop gun violence, but I knew I wasn't the credible messenger. I knew I wasn't the manager. I wasn't anything really in that realm. I knew I had to communicate uh, these ideas about nonviolence and put them in stories, put them in poetry, put them in art. And so that really became my main mission with everything, was just be able to communicate this possibility of peace, and specifically to white audiences, uh, because they found what I was doing fascinating, because it was like me when I was 25. Just the whole world of gun violence, it was otherworldly. It's just it's we can't. I think that is why yeah. I mean it was very much like watching The Wire, and so I understood that. I understood that fascination, and so that was kind of my mission with everything with art, is bringing this conversation into white audiences, and specifically suburban audiences as well. People who are affluent and are good people. They just don't understand what's going on, how they can help, and that type of thing. Yeah, it's hard work. I mean, it really is, like you said, it's sacrifice.
Yeah.
You know,
I mean, it's, and the sacrifice is not equal. So that complicates it as well. Like, it kind of goes back to what we were talking about with the church thing, right? Like, unfortunately, there's not a lot of equivalencies in this context, because the chasm that has been created in the race context, it created inequity down to the level of thought, like literally. And so a lot of people don't conceptualize the consequences of a racial hierarchy like that. But that's the truth is that, you know, a whole universe of thought that relates to seeing black people as humans was like closed off for generations to racialized white people. That's a consequence that we've pretty much ignored in the discussion about this topic. Um, I would say the closest we've gotten to talking about it is talking about white privilege, and we see how people respond to that. So, and that's like the tip of the iceberg. So, we need a chance for people to begin to investigate, and there is obviously going to be huge pushback, and it's obviously going to be uncomfortable for a lot of racialized white people to go through that process and think about it. But I can make a mean chocolate trifle. I'm talking crunchy brownie bits, some chocolate pudding, some Cool Whip, right? And uh, it really just makes everything okay. I think I'm just gonna serve them my trifle. We'll talk, and boom, everyone's gonna realize that there's nothing to be afraid of. That the reality, as bleak as it may seem, it opens the door to new possibilities they didn't even imagine before. And those
Yeah.
possibilities are the ones that you're talking about. A world of nonviolence, a world of peace, a world where we can coexist without the constant threat of violence that we live under now. Um, so, yeah.
It's like what makes people open up, right? I mean, that's the hard part. There's so many things about the physics of, you know, getting someone
I
of
think
my background
I,
to interact with someone, on the street, or have that real direct experience, because obviously like that moves the heart, you know, and I just, I think art, and this happened to me at St. John's, right? Like we read Dubois, the Soul of Black Folk, and we read King speeches and stuff like that. And it was a time where we could talk about these things without, I don't know, there was I definitely understand what you're saying. Like you need to kind of throw people into ice water, and let them figure out how to swim.
I mean, they
Uh,
can't avoid if they're avoiding the harsh reality of the present, then they're avoiding it. Like,
so, but there's two things, right? Like you have, so like that's a very, I feel like a modern art sense of art, right? Like, how do we change minds? Well, we're going to throw them, we're going to show them death personified. I guess I'm more of an ancient type, and I think that people are kind of led to change by beauty, and also harsh
But
realities.
brother,
But
the
I
beauty
definitely,
that you're talking about, the beauty that you're talking about in this particular race context, that can only be gleaned by getting past the fear. It's a process. Like you have to get past the fear first and you have to experience it. If you never experience the fear, if you're always avoiding it, you will never see the beauty that's on the other side of interracial relations between humans and like why you might need to change yourself and your lifestyle and the way you think about the world around you. It's huge. It's a lot. I know it's asking so much and it's fearful for people to do that, but like ultimately I think that art can catalyze that thought process. I do agree with that 100%. I know it can. But if we're going to do it on a large scale, which I think needs to happen, that I think an art piece can only be like the beginning, right? Like we need a way for people to have the option to engage in it more than just like as a novelty or more than just as a fantasy or more than just as a academic study or more than just as a it has to be real because it is real, and so like um the more we try to avoid the reality of the situation, I feel like it only empowers like the forces that have already been keeping us from like developing a solution and moving forward into the nonviolent realm. Like we have to at this point, I think, have a more direct confrontation. I think I could.
So what does that? So what does that mean? Like, what are you alluding to with the
What I'm
direct?
saying is that just the same way that you just planted yourself in New Orleans, we need other people to do the same thing, but we need to do it in a way that they feel like they're not taking such a big risk, or that the risk is reasonable somehow. Or that they don't even think they're taking a risk at all. Like, and so my goal is to feed people, right? Like we already talked about how you drew people with cookies and whatnot. So it's definitely a food and drink event. You talked about one-on-one conversations. I'm going to create those with people who come one-on-one. They can step on stage with me and we'll have the conversation right then and there in front of everyone else, and hopefully take the fear out of it. I also plan to have some tickets that I give away to people who ask really good questions or make very good comments, and then we have dinner the next day with anyone who gets a ticket. So ultimately, it's just creating that environment over and over again, collaborating with other people who are trying to create that environment and that education and that experiential education, especially.
Mhm.
So yeah, I mean,
So that's interesting you say that. Yeah,
it's
because
date.
I mean
Yeah.
we're 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 both in the business of education, right? Like, that's what I learned this year. Like the artist is an educator, right? And so you know, I think that's really interesting. Is how do you create an education like a curriculum such that people can make those leaps of faith?
Well, brother, that's my literal job. Like, for the
Yeah.
last almost 2 decades, like I teach math, I teach English, I've taught poker, I teach swimming. I pretty much can teach most anything. I pretty much feel like I know exactly how people learn, how it all works, all the mechanisms. I've got all the tools that I need. I'm not lacking in anything except for resources. This is the only thing I've ever been lacking in. And
So
so,
what? Okay.
yeah, no, go ahead.
What would you suggest? If you know a year long curriculum or
You mean on
this
like
type
the
of.
subject of race? Well,
I,
on
I
what? On
mean,
what?
just to drive you, like, what's the goal and what do you like? What's the curriculum to create the goal? Right? Like what are you trying to do? And like, what's the curriculum to make someone become that ideal human being that you're trying to um, inspire or
Listen, I'm not,
create?
I'm not, I'm
I don't want
not,
to say create,
I'm not
but
trying to inspire an ideal human being. Here, I'll tell you exactly what I'm trying to do, and I'll tell you exactly why I'm trying to do it. Okay, so what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to give people a choice of the world that they want to live in. Do they want to live in a world that is dominated by this racial hierarchy and continue to live in it, that we've been in, that we've been living in for generations, or do they want something different? That's the question. That's the question that people don't ask themselves pretty much ever.
yeah, I guess I'm always stuck on how do you present the message, like not you particularly, but just
I
like
mean, I can answer for me though. Like, I mean, I have a very vivid imagination of what will happen at these events.
yeah.
You know, I didn't start by having these conversations on Twitch. I've been having these conversations since I was 6 about
Mhm.
race, deep conversations about race since I was 6. That's over 30 years. I've been doing this intentionally and consciously for all of that time. Of course, nobody cared, but I did it. I did care. I was curious. I wanted to learn more. And if you watch my poem, I don't know if you watched it. I don't think you watched that one yet, but if you watch it, you'll see why. It's because I had a experience at 6 years old when a black kid came up to me and told me I wasn't acting
Yeah,
black.
yeah, we talked about that. Yeah.
Yeah, and so from that moment, I began investigating the problem of race and racism and trying to understand how he could have existed like that. How, at 6 years old, I already knew that was extreme. The problem is extreme. And so, like, ultimately, most people don't want to face the extremity of the problem. They want to minimize it. There's a huge push, and there always has been, to minimize the problem of racism in American society, particularly. And that's strategic. It's strategic to make sure that people feel like comfortable in not doing anything about it, in not thinking of themselves as a part of it. But we are all a part of it, and we all have the power to do something about it. And so that's the reality. We need to get people on that wavelength, on that reality of feeling empowered to do something about it. So the way that I approach it is, first of all, I deal with the consequences of dehumanization that racism has wrought. And I do that by finding a human connection with with the person I'm conversing with. And I talked to Sima the Inclusionist the other day, another person who has regular race convo. She has a podcast. Check her out, raceconvo.com. But we both talked about our ability to find commonality with anyone. A universal ability to find commonality with anyone. And I've met people from all over the world. I found that to be very true. And I want to leverage that skill in front of an audience to show people that we are all human. You can literally show people just by having them witness a conversation between strangers. And I realized that a long time ago. And that opens the door. It makes them realize that there's nothing to be afraid of. That all the imaginings that they had of, machine gun fire in the streets of New York, or like X, Y, and Z, it's replaced with reality. And they have no reality to replace that with, And so I'm going to supply that. That's the beginning of creating a more realistic understanding that Black people are just human like me. And that's the first step. Once you're there and realizing that, then you can start seeing reality for what it is. Then you can start being more open to an education about the subject of race and racism. So I think the beginning is to start by finding that common connection that's distinct from race and racism. I often do that. It's usually not related to race. Then I will use that because as somebody who has a really good memory and somebody who is very observant and self-reflective, I have experienced every level and aspect of racism you can imagine. So I can literally just find that commonality, connect an experience of racism to it, and then share it, and then show the connection and show the difference between their life experience. And what it does is it highlights the fact that racism has created this, like I said, chasm before, between life experiences. Two people can have radically different life experiences in the exact same environment. And racism has made that happen across color lines. And once you realize that, then, it puts you in a more realistic frame of mind to think about the actual problem. I think a lot of people don't want to analyze the problem the way it exists. And so it's moving people's minds slowly toward a framework that's more realistic to understanding the problem, because that's what's going to lead us toward a solution. No solution to the real problem is ever going to sound right or make sense or be supported by people who can't understand the problem. And that's where we're at right now. And that's why there's so much pushback against anti-racism in general right now, because people are putting the cart before the horse. They're trying to present a solution to people who are not prepared to understand even the problem. It's never going to work. And so I'm trying to deal with that issue that probably most people are never going to figure out. So, yeah.
I mean, that's for the endeavor, right? It's worth chasing the thing that people deem impossible, right? I mean, that's what moves the world.
Of course, brother. And I'm always chasing. I've been proving people wrong since I was a child, bro. I've been proving people wrong at every step of the way. So it's not going to stop now. like I know myself very well. I know what I'm capable of. I know what my strengths and weaknesses are. Like I'm not afraid of being vulnerable with people. I'm not afraid of
Yeah.
like, I told a story like about me not even knowing that people were making fun of me for 30 minutes today. So like, I'm not afraid of telling these stories of exposing my true self. And I think that honestly, that's probably the number one quality I have that's going to make me successful, because most people who would ever think of doing what I'm doing would probably not have that mindset. But like, I, at least people who I've run into. So yeah, so I'm looking forward to the future and just like gaining more support. And I appreciate you coming on and helping me take one step in that direction, brother.